Minnie is the founder and CEO of Velmeni, but she couldn't attend due to another associate and her colleague, who is the chief architect and CTO, Digvijay. Again, Digvijay, he brings tons of experience with many startups as CTO, and currently he's chief architect at Velmeni, which is AI-based company focusing on dental market. So, Digvijay, would you like to elaborate a little more on you?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Digvijay Singh. As Naveen mentioned, I work as a chief architect at Velmeni. We are transforming the dental imaging space for disease detection and other detections. I have been working a long line of experience working with IBM and other consulting companies, and then I have been in startups for almost 13 years now. I've founded my own companies, and then also been um, uh, um, CTO and chief architect role in other startups. Um, uh, and now I'm working in bioengineering as well as computer vision. Uh,
Thank you, Digvijay. All right. So with that, let's just start off with our first theme of the day is mostly on the CISO's roles, which have evolved a lot and continue to evolve, obviously, with all this innovation which is happening with AI, etc., in last 2 years. And we don't know what will happen in the next 2 years because just the pace of technology is advancing so rapidly. So starting with Ben, I mean, you have been on the security and IT compliance and many other roles. So how do you, if you can kind of, elaborate on, how do you think the CISO's role has evolved over from, previous 5, 10 years or going forward? Where do you see it's going?
Uh, so Naveen, to respond, I come from a startups perspective rather than like at larger companies, your scope is somewhat limited. Like say, for example, you might be just concerned with application security or incident response, whereas at a startup, the teams are much smaller, and you're responsible for almost all facets of security, like information security, application security, physical security, et cetera, et cetera. So at a startup, your scope is much more wide. So that is from my perspective, Naveen.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And Ketan, similarly, you've been, from large companies like GE to startup to late stage startups. And so how do you see, or how have you seen even in your own career as well as the role of CISOs that has evolved?
Yeah, I think over the last 10 to 15 years, the CISO community or the CISOs are becoming more so thought leaders, and the companies and the organizations and the leadership, including the board, is trying to rely heavily on the CISO being a thought leader and managing risks over time, right? They're becoming more strategic in nature, and like even Ben mentioned, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a large company or a small company. Sometimes you have to wear multiple hats. And even at GE, even though I had a specific role, I was involved in multiple cybersecurity initiatives or functions and wearing multiple hats. So it just depends on the organization. And I think it's becoming a thought leader. The one thing, though, I will say um, that the people these days are looking for a much more rounded CISO compared to before. I think previously it was more technical CISOs, and these days they're looking for much more rounded CISOs that can fit in or understand multiple functions within the organization.
So Digvijay, I don't know if you've interacted with the CISO community, and if you have any insights you want to share from your side as more into selling into them, if you were involved.
I think that from my perspective as a CTO, it's a balancing act, especially startups where teams are small and you have the product momentum that has to be maintained. for startups to survive. It's really important that that momentum keeps moving forward. And at the same time, on the other hand, is security. So I think there are many other things that you have to balance, but I would say security and momentum go hand in hand. As you get more momentum, more traction, we work with the security team to up the security game. So it's for startups, especially from a CTO's role, uh, it's uh, it's an engineering momentum and security balance that we have to maintain.
Thank you. Thank you, Digit. So I see we have, and I want to ask some of the folks who are attending who've been also in that role. I see Arhan. Hi, Arhan. Good to see you here. And I know you are also in the health tech area. You're on mute. If you'd like to provide any insights, I mean, how you see. Arhan, would you like to? I know you're on mute. So just anyone else from the audience who is in that role of CISO or security, head of security and compliance, and if you'd like to say, provide your insight, or if you have any questions for the panelists. Otherwise, I'll move to the next one.
Yes. Can I?
Yeah, Mohammed, please, if you can introduce 2 lines about yourself, and then you can go ahead with your insight or question, whatever you have.
Yeah, myself, Dr. Jamal. I am from San Francisco, and we are working on a couple of startups. So some of them, like, definitely with the clinical data. And so we want to implement the AI. So my always concern was like how to make the compliance in terms of security. I mean, so if I understood correctly, it seems like it is still evolving. It is not yet there. I mean, in terms of security, I'm talking.
Okay, so your question is, you are more concerned about from the AI security side, or I didn't get it clearly, so that some.
Yes.
Okay, so Ben, or if you want to take a stab at it.
And people like someone who is not having background of cybersecurity or IT, so how they can keep themselves updated and make sure they don't make any any lacunae there.
Sure, I could take a shot at answering one aspect. So we're a FDA regulated company again, and we really screen what sort of Gen AI technologies are being introduced into our company as third-party software. And so a lot of times, there might be certain technologies that our personnel want to introduce within the company and possibly part of the software, but we have a process to vet all third-party vendors and their products. A lot of times with these startups, they have these little privacy notices in small print saying that the data that they ingest will, either belong to them or they'll use it to train their models, which is a no-no for us. So automatically off the bat, we would just say to those proposing to use such technologies within our company as well, we will not allow for that. The technologies that we do use, they do have certain statements saying that they will not use the data that they ingest to train their models or use it elsewhere. So right now, in a limited scope, we do allow usage of Google Gemini and also Microsoft Copilot. But other than that, we heavily screen and vet out such technologies that come within the company. Naveen.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Ketan, how about you, your experience from past or now current company? How you look at it?
It's really interesting because obviously the way I think about AI is maybe I'm aging myself, but we're in the time when if you remember many years back when the internet was coming into play, right? And as security professionals, it was the Wild West. We didn't have enough guardrails. And I think That's where we are at with AI today, that the models and everything that are coming, there aren't enough guardrails currently available, and the security teams need to be prudent in figuring out and communicating and educating the people. Now, to answer your questions specifically about being a startup and what you should keep in mind, I think what Ben mentioned was very important is when you evaluate a vendor that you're going to use, make sure that they're not using your data to train their models. That's very important. Number two is make sure that any vendor that you choose for that they are compliant with certain certifications, right? Security certifications. So they have a process and a standard that they're following that you can get some level of assurance from that. So that's number two. Number three is just be prudent, right? It's logical. If you think there's data that you don't want to share with any AI model, then don't put that in there. Take that data out, and then you can test and get results based on that. So just understand, hey, what is critical IP? What is information that you cannot share? And it's just being logical as you enter that data. So I think those are three things that I would focus on.
Digvijay, you have a AI-based solution for the dental market, and you're also FDA approved. So how are you looking at it? Because you are leveraging AI-based, technologies, etc.
Yeah, we are very, very careful about letting any Gen AI in. Most of our models are trained on data. We do all our training in-house. So we don't use external companies specifically for AI ML work. It's all internal. It's not shared outside. It's kept in a secure location, not exposed on the internet. So we have to keep it very guarded. And as Ketan said, just be logical about what you're doing. Sometimes just asking questions and thinking through things will give you the answer that whether this is reasonable or not. And again, like size matters, right? If you're like a 1% company, you can take more risks. And as you scale, you get more process and you can reduce your risk profile. But if you as a startup, if you're getting started, too much security sometimes for startups and thinking only about security won't get you anywhere. But as you scale and as you get more data, you have to be very careful about it.
So Jeshri, you all, how do you look at? I know you're a large company. If you want to provide some insights, I know you're on mute. Jeshri, if you're there. And
Naveen, I can chime in a couple of my 2 cents.
So please go ahead.
My name is PK. My name is a bit of a tongue twister, so people call me PK, P for Peter, K for Kingmaker. I'm in the healthcare and AI space, but I do come from a security background 2.5 decades ago. Quite a lot has changed. Now we are talking about agentic AI and the threats that are associated with that. Because today AI can actually mock an hospital calling the patient, or a doctor physician calling the patient and pretending exactly like that person, and can collect personally identifiable information. Now it's a completely you can have the best of hospital infrastructure, but if your patient is actually giving away information out, and that opens up, the Trojan is actually not inside the hospital, actually could be outside, given the power of agentic AI to be able to fake a voice call which can exactly emulate the doctor. If somebody is going to speak like Naveen over the phone with the muted screen, we're not going to be able to differentiate between Naveen and the AI, right? That's a threat that exists. And then there's so many other threats. But if I have to look at it, right, if I have to share some thoughts, security is divided into 3 areas: data security, network security, and agentic AI security. Again, there are vulnerabilities across these 3 areas. If you have to guard them, you need to have different approaches to it. But irrespective of whatever domain that you're protecting, the way to look at it is to look at vulnerabilities that exist in each of these domains. And these vulnerabilities could be even at a container level vulnerability, or an orchestration Kubernetes level vulnerability that could involve strengthening, doing a vulnerability assessment, and then strengthen, because no hacker looks for the strongest link. They actually are as strong as the weakest link, right? So they look for the holes that are there in the system, and then they can first compromise that using toolkits that are currently available online. And thanks to AI agents now, that process is made that much easier for them. So identifying the vulnerabilities and blocking them, and irrespective of whichever domain it is in, across data networking and agentic workforces is what I would approach it. And if you guys want more data, I can provide in terms of how the process can be streamlined.
Yeah, thank you, PK. Let me ask, anyone else wants to chime in? Maybe have some new folks. Josh from Ubico. Josh, would you like to share your experience if you are involved with the AI stuff in your company? I know you're on mute.
Hi. This is quite the distinguished crowd. I didn't expect to be presenting today.
No, it's just informal, so not to worry.
We listen to a lot of the same advice, and we're hearing from our leadership and from our high security practitioners a lot of the same advice, where you need to be very aware of where data is going, whether it is PII data or whether it is just non-public data. With the AI models the way they are, they will take every advantage to get their hands on any little drop of data they can to further train models. Identity is going to be more and more foundational as we move forward and as we see more growth in kind of the agentic / impersonative type AI attacks. And we really just urge caution and, urge common sense. And I think that's, what I've heard from the other speakers so far. Look at what is on offer, look at the policies of the vendors you're working with, and think about how your data might be misused if it fell into those hands.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. I was gonna ask Tony. Tony, if you want to, I know you're driving, I think, right? So, but if you wanna chime in with your insights, since you've been involved with tons of companies in the compliance and security leading roles.
Yeah, I just second this. I mean, I've like most of us have been in industry. I've been a practitioner and in partnerships, and right now helping a lot of startups and making sure we don't create a lot of Me Too startups. At the speed of AI, right? I mean, if we had 4,000 by next year or two, we're going to have 7,000 the way I see it. So good luck to those CISOs who are already suffering from vendor fatigue. You're going to have the same, dish that you had with a little bit of whipped cream on top called AI. That's the frustrating part. We have a major vendor fatigue problem. I think what was said already is, it sounds like common sense, but a lot of people either are not paying attention or not listening. So I think it's critical to make sure that, it all starts with knowing your data, where your data is, whether you're building your AI or you're feeding that AI to some sort of agentic or whatnot, right? Understanding your data, the lineage of data, the privacy, the data governance, and all the different aspects of data, right? Otherwise, you're gonna get garbage in, garbage out, and two, it's the risk of contamination, right, that you have. So I heard on the call those that are making sure that are not using Gen AI, and I think it's great that you keep them accountable on the contracts, but then we all been burned by privacy. So contractually, that's a good deterrent, but I think there are a lot of technologies out there that we need both data governance as well as AI governance. And I know it's a very crowded space. Just look at the acquisition path that is happening. I guess we had all kind of firewalls. Now we need AI firewalls and AI governance. So it's not for lack of innovation, but also there's a lot of noise out there. Like everybody else, I'm trying to help discern, and find out who really has something that can help. It's not we don't want to just go add another 50 AI tools to to save ourselves from this new attack surfaces coming in. A lot of it comes from education. My questions or my concern is, well, you bring this, open AI or Copilot or whatever that is. How are we going to govern access, right? I don't have the solution, but the questions I have is, one is from prompt engineering. We talked about AI governance. It's about, how do you make sure one is the knowledge, who has access to that knowledge? There's some great companies like Gnostic that is trying to tackle that problem, which is like a RBAC. But there's a lot of other companies like Protect got acquired, Hidden Layer, there's a lot of buzz around it, probably another 15, 20 of them. What are you guys looking at when it comes to tackle this new attack surface, right? This, AI governance, data governance, and then how do you enforce that? Are you relying, on, I don't know, enterprise browsers? Would you expect enterprise browsers to solve that problem? And then are you going to block people from opening up another Google with a different identity and go to ChatGPT and submit the data? I have more questions than answers, but I'm curious to see how you guys tackling that. One thing is to govern your users. The other is to protect your models, whether it's something you're bringing in. At this point, I'm more of a SpongeBob. I'm just, trying to, capture how are people tackling. It's like you said, it's a very rapidly evolving attack surface, like nothing else we've seen before. So I'll leave you with that. I don't know if maybe that triggers some additional conversations.
No, and I can answer a couple of those.
Yeah, please, Ketan.
So Tony, I think so at the company that I'm at right now, we are making a big push into the use of AI in a variety of ways. And so obviously in my role, it's obviously challenging how to kind of manage and have guardrails around it. A few things. I think this is still an evolving area. A lot of people that even I've spoken to, they're trying to figure things out. But some of the things that we are trying to do is keeping it simple. Things like, hey, training and awareness, right? Making sure everybody's being trained and constantly doing that. Not only once a year, it's like periodically making people aware. Two is making sure that we have good RBACs in place, even for people accessing other AI models, etc. Three is I personally, and there may be other enterprise monitoring tools that will allow us to catch or monitor the use of AI from within the company. But I personally think that there needs to be additional monitoring tools that will be built out. There's one company that we are in talks with right now, Turmeric is a partner with NVIDIA. And it seems like their solution is pretty good where you can police, monitor, and implement policies and just allow individuals within your company to access what you need them to access, at least from your endpoint, which is your laptops, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So, and I think the governance is still a work in process that we're working through. But anyway, this is some of my experience as of late.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ketan.
I can share an
anyone else?
experience, Naveen.
So,
One of
PK, can we I just want to make sure everyone else also gets a chance if you
Sure.
can hold off. So I just wanted to ask other people. So anyone else want to share on this one? Because I want to jump into, we have only 25 minutes, another one. PK, unless you have very quick, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the area of security for in the radiology space, the company that I serve moved everything onto the cloud. Contrary to the typical process of putting them back into a on-prem, and there was certain amount of attacks and all that, the attack surfaces that we talked about. But you can actually put an IDS system. We cleverly put an IDS system into that cloud infrastructure, and that was able to defend and protect any access to or any penetration to data. So, and then put layers of security around it, not just rely on one, but a multiple IDSs. Prevent and safeguard your data, and that's something that worked out very well. Yeah.
Okay. So next topic I wanted to delve into, like one of the thing we wanted to focus on 3 areas in the health tech area. Second is the vendor risk and supply chain resilience, because like When you are regulated and FDA approved, then you have to be very particular about when you deal with your vendors, right? So how do you look at that vendor risk and supply chain side? So I would, if Ben, he can start off with that, that'll be great.
Sure, Naveen. So as I alluded to, we have a process to vet all the vendors that we let into the company since we are an FDA regulated company. So regulatory participates, our legal participates, and security obviously participates. And what we look at from the perspective of security is, again, for these Gen AI companies, typically there's like really small startups, except for the ones that we did take on for Google and Microsoft in terms of like Copilot and Gemini. But the smaller companies, as others have alluded to, you have to really scrutinize their privacy notices as to whether or not the data ingested is being used to train their models, whether or not they retain, the storage of your data, and you got to determine whether or not, the data being ingested is like company confidential, PII, or like it's just data that one could get anywhere. So we vet these vendors very heavily. If the privacy statements do pass muster, as someone else alluded to, we look at whether or not they've like achieved any security certifications like.
I think Ben's battery died. He's going to switch to phone. So in the meantime, I don't, Ketan, do you wanna kind of go over it? I know I have had experience with you as a customer, me being your vendor. So you obviously drove us pretty hard for 3 months a while ago.
I think
But
that
I
you
appreciate.
can say the process that we followed, right? It'll be easier
Yeah,
that
yeah.
way of how
No,
tough.
actually, it was good. It forced my team to just come up with a new framework like NIST 853 very fast. I
Um,
had to. Okay,
uh,
there you are, Ben.
yeah, so sorry about that. So again, we look at whether or not those companies have achieved any security certifications like HITRUST, ISO, or like SOC 2 Type 2, and those will help vet those companies, and we also have like a security questionnaire for those startups that they have to respond to and attest to. So back to you, Naveen.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Ketan, sorry, I was asking you
Yeah,
how
so
you have looked at it. Yeah.
yeah, so away from what Ben mentioned, I mean it's very similar. I think the vendor and supplier management is going to be critical, and based on the FDA regulation that came out a couple of years ago, they also added vetting vendors. But we have been vetting vendors for a long time, and it's going to get more and more tricky, especially when we have smaller companies. The one thing that I have been thinking of considering, if it's a smaller company, away from the security questionnaire, is really vetting the technology and the use of the technology, and also having the ability to install, instead of using the cloud-based model, is having a local install that we can utilize and leverage, especially if they don't have good security control. So from a vendor management perspective. So.
Thank you. Thank you. How about Digvijay? I mean, you also work with the vendors. Do you guys have any processes and how you look at it?
So again, we are FDA regulated. We used to have a very strong security and compliance team, and they take care of that. But purely from a consumption standpoint, we most of our stack. Again, I come from engineering, so I understand that really well. We try to use the established players, large cloud providers, so we don't run into that problem. And if we have to work with smaller companies, then they have to go through a compliance rigor. But as far as possible, if we have a choice, we would default to an established player, because we are a smaller team and we have to be very nimble.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else? I know we have. I was seeing Victor. Victor, you've been in the role of CISO and security and compliance for a while. So do you have how you look at when you kind of vet out your suppliers from
Yeah,
a vendor risk point of
sure.
view?
I actually have one comment and then one question for the panel. So the comment was just in response to the gentleman that was speaking now on, given that you're a startup and you try to leverage larger players, the issue I see with that from my angle is the larger players are really rigid. And I don't have, as a startup, I also work at a startup right now, Series B2. And with the larger players, I don't have too much influence in getting either the support level I'm wanting or ability to influence their roadmap, right? Product roadmap. And so what I see versus startups, smaller startups, or even late stage startups, I have more influence on there. And especially if I'm willing to engage them on the technical and customer feedback perspective, I seem to get a better response in that kind of collaboration. Now, do I want to do that on all of my vendors? No, that would be crazy. But I think on some of the bleeding edge solutions we're looking for, the startups actually give me more tailored options or more customization that I can get out of it. And through that, through influence I get with these, I seem to get better results on these bleeding edge kind of areas. So that's the comment. The question I want to have is, in the highly regular area, the other gentleman mentioned vetting of, there's a process that it's in place, and they get legal, they get security, they get privacy involved. The thing is, nothing is static, right? These days, vendors don't stay in their lane. They a lot of times expand more offerings and they upsell. And a lot of times, if they're an existing vendor that's already implemented, it's easy to get more functionality, from these same vendors. And so, how do you handle this changing scope, right? Adding more features, adding more, data that you share with them, right? As well as your use cases that changes over time. So what mechanism do you have to not just vet the vendor, right at onboard, and maybe renewal time, whatever your cadence that is, every 1 year or 3 year, but how do you then adapt to other changes that happens in a way? I mean, everyone is adding some sort of AI feature to it, and probably do that out of band from your regular cycle. So how do you handle that? Because this is a real issue that I see many CISOs will face.
Yeah, so I think that to your first point, I agree. Like, you cannot always use standard large players for everything, and you have to go to smaller product companies to do some of the things. I think we work as a very tightly integrated team. So engineering, compliance, infrastructure, security, we all come together, and then we brainstorm the path forward for each of those vendors. Yeah, we do still have the luxury of doing that. I guess as we get bigger, we have to figure that out. But for now, like, we come together. So compliance is baseline, so they have to meet all that. But in order, if you want to move forward with somebody or not, we come together and decide. And each function gets to participate and give their viewpoint.
Okay.
Okay.
Ben or Ketan, you want to take a
Yeah, Victor,
stab at it?
you bring up an interesting question, and I think that's a challenge for a lot of people, right? One of the things that we have tried to do here at the company that I am at is anytime there's a new module or a new request being added, we try to evaluate them with the same scrutiny as them being a new vendor. And the first thing that we start with is, okay, this is a new module. What kind of data is it going to collect? Where is it going to reside? How is it going to be used, etc. And depending on the data type, we'll either go deeper or not go deeper. There have been instances that, things just don't get caught. And as part of the year-end review, we do work with finance or other teams to evaluate whether the original use case that we approved the vendor for is the same use case. So has the use case changed? Have we added additional, modules and functionality that we started using? So it's part of that yearly review process that we try to catch. And I'm not saying we'll catch 100%, but that's our filter.
Thank you. Ben?
Oh, sure. So to the first point that Victor had. So again, depending on regulated industry, and sure, if we didn't have to safeguard over 3 million patient data records, then yeah, different Gen AI startups. But because we are tasked with safeguarding, so many patient data records and securing their patient data, we can't just say that we want to try out certain different Gen AI technologies. Depending on the industry, of course, they could certainly do that. But since we're again in a heavily regulated industry that we're audited by the FDA, we just simply can't do that. And then the second one about monitoring whether or not there's feature expansion. Yeah, it's kind of difficult right now. We monitor heavily the Gen AI technologies that we do allow in. So for example, Gemini, right? So Google decided in I think February to grant Gemini enterprises to go along with Gemini for workspace licenses. They just added that, and they'll tell you later upon renewal that you have to pay X number of additional dollars upon renewal. And so when we found that out, even though in their privacy documents they say they're not going to use any of your data to do their training, you could build your own local models, and all the data that you utilize within Gemini, it belongs to you. It won't go outside. We decided to not revoke all those Gemini enterprise licenses to everybody in the company who had Google Workspace licenses, and only granted to those few that we had already previously vetted. And so again, back to Victor's point, yeah, it's a problem, and right now, there's only right now we could just monitor it very carefully. Back to you, Naveen.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Oh, by the way, just they're in the chat box. If you guys want to connect with each other, just put your LinkedIn if you want to, and just take it forward. That's one of the obviously idea of this event also for you guys to continue to share and build your professional network. Okay, so with that, the last we have only 10 minutes, so I wanted to go to the third kind of the theme we wanted to focus on was, are there any the patient, these risk-based stuff, which you can turn it into the privacy, like translating cyber risk into patient safety matrices. Ben or Ketan or Digvijay, have you looked at it from that perspective?
So
kind of taking cyber risk with the correlation to patient safety risk, kind of some sort of a matrix or anything. Is there anything you can talk about how you look at it?
The only thing I could lean on is looking at the type of data that is coming in. So for example, it's a data classification, right? So with your customers, what kind of data is coming in? If it's patient PHI data, PII data, obviously, and just classifying that and trying to protect it from a risk matrix perspective. After I know the data types, put it to the risk angle as to how would you classify this within your risk as well. That's the only model that I've done lately, and this works for the vendors too. Even all the vendors that we work with and we scrutinize and evaluate, we put them through a risk model and say, okay, what kind of data type do they have? Are they on our premises, or are they cloud? Do they have any security certifications or not? And based on that, we will assign them a risk category as well on how often and how deep we would go in our evaluation.
And how about Ben?
Yeah,
You look at it.
very similar to what Ketan says, that within our company, we do subject these vendors to a SIG-Lite type of questionnaire, and then come up with a risk score to evaluate those companies. And depending on the risk score, again, it depends on the data type that they're ingesting. And in terms of like a risk registry, we do annual risk assessments of our product. And I think this year when we do the risk analysis, we will incorporate certain risks associated with utilizing these Gen AI companies and including in our risk registry. So back to you, Navi.
Thank you, Ben. Now how about you, Digvijay? Anything?
I'm not sure if you asked this question from a vendor standpoint, but we have a compliance team, and the compliance team assesses the kind of data that we store. It doesn't change very often. We know the data we have, and we are building a very specific product for a very so we've already segregated that data, and special rules apply to the PI data. We also do internally a lot of data anonymization, even before it goes into our own training models, to protect that information.
We have Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Good to have you here. I know you've been an investor as well as chief medical officer for some of the pharma companies. I don't know if you have any insights how you look at from this patient safety perspective. If you'd like to provide your insights or any questions here.
I think having worked at one of the largest healthcare providers in the world, we backed up, on cloud, on-prem, and, cybersecurity was paramount for everything that we did. The company I'm working at now, again, just starting, very small company, 4 people. Not a lot of big concern because we're working under the umbrella of another company that we spun off of. So, but yeah, it's essential. There's nothing worse than getting the letter from a third-party vendor or from your company saying that, oh yeah, we had this third-party vendor that was processing billing, and they leaked all your information. I probably personally gotten 3 of those, either through my dental care, my medical care, or some other, aspect of my care. So happens unfortunately all the time.
Right. Thank you, Aaron. Anyone else who's in the healthcare field? I knew there was Ranjana, I think she left. There were a couple of founders who are doing healthcare stuff. Anyone else involved in the healthcare side would like to provide their insight or any questions you have for or anyone else? If not, since we are running out of time. So
I only leave you with one question, and that is, the security guys can only police so much, right? I think right now we're all trying to get ourselves to the point that, cybersecurity governance becomes an enabler for the business. It's a race right now for Gen AI, agentic AI. There's only so much policing we can do. I guess the question we need to ask is, what are the controls that are missing? What are the things that we would require so we could enable the business to go assess, use, monitor, control the whatever AI, whether it's Gen AI or they bring in models inside, or going to some sort of a new Apple store that's going to sell agentic AIs for doing X, Y, and Z. Business is business, right? They're going to find ways to do it. If you're telling me I cannot use ChatGPT and you govern my GWS, well, so it sounds great. I'll just go ahead and log in with a different user ID as a user, create a different persona, and then I'll go open up ChatGPT, So people are very inventive in how to go around blockage if they're trying to enable the business. I think we need to kind of shift that and says we cannot continue to police business, especially in healthcare, right? There's so many AI companies going about new molecular, discovery, this, that. I mean, we just in Silicon Valley, just go up and down here and you can see applicable AI in healthcare is one of the top 3, right? So how are we going to solve this problem? I think as security practitioners, we need to kind of reshift our mindset. And I don't know the answer, how do we get ourselves in a position of enablement, and what is missing? Because this attack surface is coming in, right? I think you can do all the checks and balances and all the basic that we need to do. I think the point that Victor brought up is a very good one, right? We do our assessment, they come in and then they go, okay, land and expand. And yes, you may want to have them use, controlled AIs, but if a vendor comes in and gives you a feature for a fraction, or is a known vendor, you trust them, and then they go use, I don't know, OpenAI or something's on the back end, it's harder to detect them because they're already a vetted vendor, right? I think the compliance checks and this third-party audits, it also needs to evolve and needs to also be dynamic, right? I think we have to do a dynamic governance and monitoring and start thinking about a secure by design approach, a defeat by design approach, to think about more preventative measures and not so much detective, right? We will not be able to build this AI and hope that we're going to go bring AI security, right? The bolt-on approach to security has failed time and time again. And I think I'm curious to see finding companies that can help us build a secure by design. That's my goal. That's what I'm looking at, the innovation that is happening around this. And I would invite everyone else to see, let's get off being polices and let's think about how do we become enablement? What is the ask of the industry? And start working with those innovation and say, look, these are my requirements. If you want to work for me, if you want to be my vendor, these are my expectation. And have this conversation early, so we stop this madness of creating a lot of Me Too players and AI wannabe companies, which continuously increases the attack surface. That's my share for today. So
Okay. Anyone else? And I think we're almost running into our last minute.
I mean, just with one last question, if anybody has thought about it, the shadow AI problem. It's a new one emerging. Anybody has heard about it, thought about it? Something to think about.
That's a good one. So Ketan?
Yeah, we have heard about it. We are thinking about it, but I'll kind of it's a challenging one. I'll defer back to what I stated earlier. We are still in the early days of trying to put guardrails and understand the use of AI as we did in the internet days. And so, but even though, I mean, you talk about shadow AI coming, absolutely. But in all this day and age, even shadow IT hasn't been solved completely today. And IT has been around for way longer than AI. So it's a problem that's going to continue to persist, that we'll have to continue to figure out how to move forward. But I don't have an answer for it.
Let's get ahead of it. Otherwise, it'll be a difficult problem.
Yeah.
Ben, any last statement on this?
Concur with what Ketan said.
Yeah. How about Digvijay? I think you're still.
Yeah, I agree. Like some of these problems are very novel, and we can't potentially have. We're seeking.
All right. So with that, I'd like to adjourn a meeting, and thank you all for coming. And really appreciate all the great insights as well as the questions. And so we'll keep an eye for the next months, and we'll be focusing on same probably one particular segment. So we'll be there within a week or so. So thank you, Ketan, again, Ben and Digvijay, Brian, Apurv, Derek, Tony. I'm trying to just call out everyone who's there. Victor, Aaron, Shukai. Appreciate you having me here, Amy and Josh. Thank you for coming. Subra, Elwin, Elon, and Romil. And obviously a lot of folks have put their LinkedIn. You're gonna connect Tony, Victor, and Sherwin. I know some of you guys didn't get the opportunity. Devu, thank you for coming. Hopefully next time join in. I'll make sure that all of you get some time for any
I'm
insights or
starving.
anything
Let's
else.
go eat.
All right.
I don't know, go out and get something.
Okay, thank
Take care.
you.
See you.
Have you heard
Bye-bye.
from your
Bye-bye.
mom? I haven't. She hasn't responded to my calls or my texts.
All right.
Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you,
No, I
everyone.
have, and
Bye-bye. All right, bye-bye.
yeah, that was hours ago. Yeah. I thought that she said that meeting started like at 10 o'clock in the morning or something.